is AMD Fussy and not Intel?
That is an excellent question. Glad you asked. AMD has had major revisions in the past few years. The first generation of Ryzen came out in 2017. AMD was so poor they couldn't even develop a chipset. They had to outsource that to AS Media. And there was a lot of bugginess and a lot of problems with it. The first year of AM4 was just atrocious when it came to compatibility and RAM support and just general getting Windows and RAM and everything up to speed. The only reason I tolerated it, and a lot of tech YouTubers, to be honest, gave AMD a bit of a pass, was because A, we desperately needed AMD to survive because otherwise Intel would be an absolute monopoly and screw all of us if that happened. Because they were offering an amazing, compelling value at the time, because when Ryzen 7 1700 launched, it was $330 for 8 cores. Intel was charging $350 for 4 cores. Yes, Intel's cores were faster, but 8 cores for $330 was such a compelling value that at the time you could kind of tilt your head sideways and go, it's a little bit annoying, but what a value.
They'll fix it, and they did.
And it did get better over time, and if you were willing to live through that, it was great. Now, with current Zen 2 CPUs, AMD has largely closed the per-core performance gap. The performance difference between a 3700X and a i7-10700 is effectively meaningless. There are circumstances where one will be 5% faster than the other and vice versa. They are so close, it is zero difference. They are effectively the same performance. So there's no performance reasons to pick one or the other. Then it comes down to how good is software support, how good are the BIOSes, what motherboard do you put it on, how is RAM compatibility, drivers, etc. It's sort of like the whole AMD versus NVIDIA video card thing. The reason why people buy AMD video cards is either ideological, screw NVIDIA, I'm buying AMD because I don't want to pay NVIDIA's prices, or they just want max frames for the minimum dollars. And AMD video cards generally offer more FPS for the money. Ever since the Navi cards launched last year, I have gotten endless flack from people who say, but the 5700 is faster than the 2600 and it's more frames for the money. Have you used both? I have, in a bunch of games, on several machines. I would never put a 5700 into my own computer over a 2600. It's fine, mostly. A lot of the time. Usually. Except when it isn't. 5% more performance, in my view, is not worth even a small amount of fuss. And I can put a 2060 Super into a machine, and it works all the time, every time. Now, here's what's funny about this statement. The previous generation cards, graphics core next. And see, this answers your question. Why is Intel not fussy? And the reason Intel's not fussy is because this is like a 5th revision of the same chip and a 10th revision of the same concept. They have not changed what they've done in so many years, they've refined it to a science. It's not because Intel is magic.
Nope.
Intel, in the past, when they've released new platforms, have had fussiness. Usually not as much, and partly due to that is because they've got more R&D budget. They can afford to throw more money at the problem. And because they're more business-focused with servers and stuff, they spend the money to validate and test in a way that AMD just doesn't have the money. But when X99 came out, do you remember your Broadwell E that you played with? Mm-hmm. Okay. You actually had the second revision of that chipset on the second CPU that went on that chipset. You got it more than the version we had was not the first X99 motherboard released, and it was not the first. There had been over a year of BIOS updates.
Right.
Anybody who bought X99 on Haswell E dealt with a lot of fussiness the first year.
Sorry. No, mine was fine.
Yes, because you got like the Zen 2 version of it. You just didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, I got the refresh.
The first Asus X99 motherboard, for example, had like 11 BIOS updates in the first year. Every month they had a BIOS fix for something.
Ouch.
There have been times when Intel comes out with Alder Lake 12th generation in about 18 months, which will have the big little configuration, fully expect fussiness.
Ouch. Okay.
I would be very hesitant to pre-order that on day one.
Exactly. That's what Jesse's saying. As soon as Intel changes their architecture, which is what Big Little will be,
There will be fussiness.
which will be Alder Lake, which will be 12th gen.
And Windows will have to support it, and programs will have to be updated. It'll be a transition period.
But how could they just wait for the launch to fix some of the problems?
Part of the problems are only discovered when they put it out in the world and customers start banging on it with real hardware and they start reporting issues and then they can fix them.
Because sometimes you don't.
Can't they do that with like?
It's really expensive.
Controlled?
It's really expensive to do that.
Oh.
Like really expensive. Intel can afford to do more of it than AMD can, and which is why in general Intel has fewer teething issues, but they don't have none. Their recent Z490 launch, for example, had a problem with the 2.5 gig networking thing, which they fixed.
Yeah.
They fixed it with a BIOS patch.
Yeah.
And it's flawless now. And it only took a couple of weeks and one patch and it was done.
Yep.
So they fix it quicker because they can afford to.
Yep.
The thing is,
Yes.
when Ryzen first launched, it was 8 cores versus 4 cores. But now it's 8 cores versus 8 cores. And now it's 310 versus 280.
Yep.
Now it's a 10% price difference for the same performance. I don't need to buy the budget brand
Exactly.
for 10%.
No.